Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm reacting to When Will I Finally Get Enlightened from Swami Tadatmananda. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. Tadatmananda. I believe that's his name. So when will I finally get enlightened? I'm hoping he'll be able to answer this question. Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Or is it a decade or a century from now? Who knows? But in reality, I'm not really seeking. How do I say this? I'm not after getting enlightened. I will live my life as I live my life. Should I happen to get enlightened during that process, then so be it. But I do believe that is the right way to approach it. If you're constantly seeking enlightenment, focusing on it so much, you probably will not become enlightened. I don't think enlightenment comes by force. It is obviously doing things, but not by force, by willingness, openness. I do believe that to be true. So anyways, let's go ahead and find out when we will become enlightened. I need to remember this guy's name. Tadatmananda. Tadatmananda, yes. Swami Tadatmananda.
Here's a question sent by Ian, who's in Canada. He asks, how can I even hope to gain enlightenment when I see people like you and your guru, Swami Dayananda, who have spent so many years completely devoted to Vedanta before becoming enlightened? I've been studying Vedanta for close to a decade now, but I haven't attained moksha, liberation. Although I do get glimpses of my true, limitless nature from time to time.
I will assume that he's going to say you can't force yourself to get to this point. It, in a sense, must come naturally. Otherwise, in order to get to this point, you must constantly focus on getting onto this point. And at that point, it becomes kind of, I won't say pointless, but it's forced. And he said that he has been liberated. I wonder if he says that. I wonder if he's considered to be enlightened. I don't know if he is or isn't.
How long does it take? To get a college degree, it usually takes 4 years. To become a fully qualified medical doctor, it might take 12 years. But we can estimate time spans like these only when there's a fixed syllabus or a specific sequence of required lessons. As you might expect, the process of gaining enlightenment is utterly different. Instead of a fixed sequence of lessons, the process is actually non-linear. Yet Vedanta's non-linear process does pass through several stages, and we'll discuss those stages here. First, we have to understand properly what enlightenment really is. According to the rishis, the sages of ancient India, enlightenment is the discovery of your true inner nature, Atma, which is pure consciousness, unborn, eternal, limitless, perfect, and divine. But your true limitless nature is covered by a so-called veil of ignorance that prevents you from recognizing your own essential divinity and transcending all worldly suffering. So enlightenment is the recognition or realization of your own true nature by removing the veil of ignorance that covers Atma. That ignorance is removed by knowledge, a special kind of knowledge of Atma.
I was going to say knowledge. Usually that's jnana yoga, knowledge. But, so the knowledge of the Atman may be a different kind of knowledge. Or perhaps it's still the same.
Self-knowledge. So, how long does it take? Ironically, the veil of ignorance covering Atma is removed instantaneously as soon as self-knowledge arises. So, in a manner of speaking, enlightenment doesn't take any time at all. But to gain that special self-knowledge, you have to be ready for it. You have to be adequately prepared. And all that preparation takes time. Let me explain. In high school, before you could learn trigonometry, you had to study algebra and geometry first. In the same way, before you can gain self-knowledge, you have to undergo several crucial steps of preparation first.
I will say, I have obtained some of this, like a very small portion, I will say. And merely, it's how I obtained this is, again, I go back, everything kind of started from that world religion class when she told us, our teacher, I believe she is from India. Again, she dressed the part, she does look Indian, and she also has the symbol, or not symbol, but the red dot on her forehead. I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called. I've heard it once or twice, I think, but I don't really know what it's called. I can't remember what it's called. I have bad memory. But anyways, when she was explaining about Buddhism and how life is suffering, and ever since that, just merely saying life is suffering, it really, really, really did change how I thought about life. It really did. I couldn't believe how much merely just stating that life is suffering, that I started to think about my emotions. Merely emotions, nothing else. Not the fact that I'm Atman or that my body action is different from me. No, merely a separation from my emotions or an understanding of it. That I can do something about something or I can't. Again, these two rules that I say with sub-rules underneath them. Either if you can do something or you can't do anything. If you can't do anything about it, then your emotion's irrelevant. Why even have them? They're not going to help the situation out. So by understanding that, I separate myself from the emotion. It's, for the most part, I don't usually get it. Again, I'm not perfect, but I do feel it sometimes. Or I can do something about it. In which case I either do something about it or still don't do anything about it. But I take responsibility for my actions. And in that case, I still do not get the emotions. I can separate myself from that because I understand what I can and cannot do. And if I can do something, I understand whether I do something about it or don't. But that doesn't always work. So that's the reason why I say some of it. I've been able to do that with my life. I'm able to, how to say, have less emotional stress, I suppose. Able to separate or not be overly emotional, I guess. So that part I've learned merely because my world religion teacher told me about life is suffering from Buddha, and that just really, really, really had a very big impact on my life and how I look at my emotions and how I look at things in my life.
Just as college handbooks list prerequisites for each course, traditional texts on Advaita Vedanta list certain prerequisites that are indispensable for gaining self-knowledge. Not surprisingly, these prerequisites are extensive. They include being able to discern what is real and cultivating complete dispassion towards worldly pleasures, as well as developing deep inner silence, unwavering self-control, one-pointed concentration, and firm conviction in the truth of Vedantic teachings. These extraordinary qualities are not easily acquired. And only when they've been fully developed are you able to gain self-knowledge. But there's a further problem here. These qualities are so extraordinary that they can be gained in full measure only by someone who's already enlightened. So you can't get enlightened unless you're fully prepared, and you won't be fully prepared until you're enlightened. It's a catch-22 situation, as a common idiom says. Fortunately, this paradoxical problem does have a solution that's found in Vedanta's unique, non-linear approach to spiritual growth. Instead of first becoming fully prepared and then seeking self-knowledge, it's possible to work towards gaining preparation and self-knowledge at the same time, pursuing them both in parallel. Each pursuit supports the other until you become fully prepared and simultaneously gain self-knowledge. There's an excellent metaphor that describes this nonlinear process. Suppose you want to start a fire with some twigs, but the twigs are soaking wet. The wetness of the twigs represents your lack of preparation. Only when the twigs are dry will they burn. And only when you're fully prepared can you gain self-knowledge. Suppose you strike a match and try to ignite the wet twigs. They won't catch fire, but the heat generated by the match helps dry them out a bit. In the same way, when you first study the teachings of Vedanta, self-knowledge won't arise because of your lack of preparation. But studying those teachings will help you become a bit more prepared. After striking dozens or even hundreds of matches, the twigs will eventually dry out and finally burst into flames. In the same way, studying the teachings of Vedanta for a sufficient period of time will eventually help you become fully prepared, and then the fire of self-knowledge will ignite, burning away the veil of ignorance and revealing your true divine nature. Returning to Ian's question, just as the length of time needed to ignite a pile of wet twigs depends on how wet they were to start with, in the same way, the time you need to become enlightened depends on the degree to which you lack the qualities needed for preparation. In my case, many years were required because I sorely lacked many of the necessary qualities. In particular, I lacked emotional maturity, which is a crucial requirement. I was like a freshman in college who had to take a lot of remedial courses. But there's another aspect of Vedanta's non-linear path to enlightenment that's not often discussed or understood. When you become fully prepared and self-knowledge finally arises, the veil of ignorance covering Atma is instantly removed, enabling you to realize your true nature. But that self-knowledge arises in a mind subject to human limitations and imperfections. In particular, your mind is deeply conditioned by countless experiences you've had from childhood onwards. Those experiences have built up and reinforced a false self-concept, a false sense of identity based on identification with your body, mind, and your roles in daily life. Factors like your age, gender, and profession have molded your self-concept and have come to define you. When self-knowledge first arises in your mind, all that conditioning won't just vanish. Your false self-concept won't immediately be transformed because it's so deeply embedded in your thinking. As a result, when you first gain self-knowledge, instead of attaining moksha, liberation, you'll merely get a glimpse of your true divine nature, as Ian observed in his question.
So he seems like he's actually quite far along. I've never had this. I said a few times in the past videos that I had this blankness, but I don't think that's a glimpse of my true nature. It's literally just blank, nothing, pitch blackness for like a quarter of a second or something. And but I didn't think of it as anything other than just not having any thoughts whatsoever. So perhaps that is a part of getting there, but yeah, just blankness is all it was.
Ian's experience of merely getting glimpses of truth sounds familiar to me. In the early 1980s, my formal study of Advaita Vedanta began in weekly classes taught by a senior disciple of Swami Dayananda. Those classes were amazing, and I left each class feeling elated from the wonderful insights I was led to discover. After class, it took me about 20 minutes to drive back home. And by the time I arrived, all those marvelous insights seemed to have faded away completely. Later, I came to understand that a period of assimilation was required for those glimpses of my true divine nature to grow strong and develop into abiding, unshakable knowledge. For 30 years, I had been enveloped by a veil of ignorance, and that ignorance permeated every aspect of my thinking. A mere glimpse of my true nature couldn't possibly wipe out all that conditioning. Patterns of thinking formed in my childhood and maintained for decades, patterns that were all based on ignorance, needed time to be transformed with the help of Vedantic teachings. So, here's the big picture. After spending many years studying Vedanta and simultaneously gaining the necessary preparation, self-knowledge finally arises. But then, even more time is required to fully assimilate that knowledge. A traditional metaphor compares this process of assimilation to making rasagulla, an Indian sweet, in which little balls of cottage cheese must be soaked in a sugary syrup overnight before they're ready to eat. Just like rasagulla must be immersed in syrup for a sufficient length of time, in the same way, you have to remain immersed in the teachings of Vedanta long enough for those teachings to completely permeate and transform your thinking. Of course, this process of assimilation begs the same question. How long will it take? A cookbook will tell you how long to keep rasagulla immersed in syrup, but there's no similar guide for the process of assimilation, because it's different for each person. Fortunately, at that stage in your spiritual growth, you've already discovered your true nature, even if your mind doesn't continually abide in that truth. So, whenever your mind gets distracted and drawn away into a state of suffering, you can easily bring your mind back and lead it to abide in your true divine nature. This is the 13th video in a series that answers questions submitted by viewers. If you have a question that would serve as a good topic for a video like this one, please email me at this address, and be sure to indicate video question as the subject of the email. I'll try to address your question in a future video.
Okay, I want to leave that up there. So please, if you have any questions for him, I'm gonna try to make one. and I hope to hear his answer, and I just don't know what it's going to be yet. So yeah, I kind of figured enlightenment obviously doesn't come easy. I am capable of doing some of the things as a way of, in a sense, separating myself from my body. And my emotions. Well, that is practically included in there. Mostly my emotions so far. That is the thing that I guess ever since that day that I have developed a way of getting that portion of my ability stronger as a separation from emotion to logically think things through, to think about the problem, and then to not necessarily have so much emotional involvement in it, because that is the teachings that the world religion teacher told me. Is basically goes along the lines of give it 110%, give it everything you've got, but expect nothing from it. And that has helped a lot in terms of disappointment, really. You do something, you gave it your all, and then it didn't come out like you planned. Most people will get devastated by it. For the most part, I'm able to just kind of shrug it off, but obviously not all of it. So, like I said, I'm getting better at just that portion. But I guess I'm not quite sure about the other aspects of it, because that one for me is very clear that that's something I can feel strongly within me. Now, actions and knowledge is something different that I guess I should work on. I don't know how I could work on my actions other than be aware of my actions, which I have been. And what I mean by my actions, also my words too. I try to be aware of my words. And then knowledge. And that one I've worked on that a little bit, again from my world religions class, but it's my knowledge of my emotions. But that's about it. There's still a lot of things that needs to be worked on. Obviously, I'm not gonna force myself into enlightenment. Obviously, it's not gonna work if you do it that way. But if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that's the whole point, though. I do believe you're forcing yourself, you're not doing it right. It must come naturally. Anyways, that's my reaction to when will I finally gain enlightenment? Probably not this year. Or next year. Or the next decade for that matter. So if you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.